What I want to do is get my hardware suppliers, the guy that I buy RAID controllers and NIC controllers and CPUs and memory from, fans, whatever it is, to build me a provider, just like a driver, that reveals to this CMOM in an industry standard way, so it doesn't matter whether you're on Linux or Dell or HP, what is the health and status of that device, what are all the necessary inventory components of that device, and how do I change it? Put methods in the SIM model for altering the firmware and the driver to do update. And then I can start doing things I've never been able to do before, right? So the hardware is connected to the OS, is connected to the application. Classic example, if you've got, as a customer, something that monitors the Exchange application, right? At some point, it will tell you, whoops, Exchange is slowing down. Well, everybody using email knew that, you know, before it showed up red on your console. What it doesn't tell you is that one path in a mirrored disk array has failed, and the other path is pulling double duty, right? So if you could build these models, and the only thing prohibiting you from doing it now is that all this junk's in another agent entirely, and it's up to the poor guy at the console to figure out what's actually happening, right? And the guy becomes the correlation engine. But if you can model the interrelationships of all this, because all the instrumentation's in one place, then you can draw the fault to the RAID controller. That's why the application isn't meeting its performance level of objectives. So this standardization is really good. And if I can instrument virtual machines in exactly the same way that I instrument physical machines, so inside here, at some layer, I have instance of application 1 and instance of application 2 and so forth, and tie all of them to their hypervisor and the hardware that they use. Now the management of virtual environments becomes much simpler. And that's why we drive standards. So keep in mind that HP and IBM both have very stratified offerings, right? They've got the piece that does the hardware management down here. So that's called Insight Manager in HP terms. It's called Director in IBM terms. And there's a couple little plugins you can put in on top of it. I can get, you know, the power control thing from HP, and it does power control on HP things. And there's a little bit, we talked about this earlier, the virtualization capability, and there's a little patching that you can do on top of that. But at some point you hit this ceiling, and that management console no longer scales horizontally. The functionality you can buy to plug into Insight Manager just peters out at a certain point, and your next step is OpenView. You want operations management, you know, you want to back up to tape, you want to do all that kind of stuff, you're in the OpenView world. And that's not an integration. That's a whole new framework that you have to install, right? And it's not cheap. It's a couple of $1 million investment between the software and the services and the getting it all to work right. And the integration, even among these things, and I'm not here to slam my competitors, okay? But if you look at client management and server management in Insight Manager, it looks like this. Here's a client management console and its database, and here's a server management console and its database, and they've got a connector. That's the way Insight Manager looks for client and server management. I know, because I built them both. And if you go add something else, that's what you get, okay? You keep interconnecting things with their own console and their own database, and what you're doing is you're surfing from console to console, okay, instead of just moving over to a different tab of functionality. And OpenView is just another great big thing, and in fact OpenView is a whole suite of stuff with their own consoles and their own databases, especially after the acquisition spree that HP's been on, right? So now I got to go build this great big database in the sky and collect data all day long if I want to see MDB, right? And I use my network to collect data instead of to move, you know, data path traffic around, okay? So huge investment, forklift upgrade, and I'm just going to pop in another piece. And you pay for what you need. IBM they slowed down their acquisitions for like 3 years ago, and what's in the Tivoli Enterprise console was at one time, you know, more reasonably tightly integrated. but they've sped up again, right? So you're going to have snap-ins that feel like they have their own user interface in their own database for a while until they slow down and integrate again. And you know, quite honestly, I have the luxury of, I don't have this big framework on my back, right? I get to start from scratch. And I may not achieve the ultimate scalability because the Altiris thing was built to manage, you know, thousands and not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. We have to play some tricks where you put package servers and you build, you know, one console to rule them all, you know, kind of architectures. But then in an environment that big, they already got a framework, and I just plug into it, you know, with my toolkits. My competitors' customers hear a different story. If you want it to run right, it all needs to integrate into OpenView. If you want it to run right, it all needs to integrate into Tivoli. And that's best for you, right? But is it? We already know what it costs. And here's another fundamental difference. If you look at what we do in services, especially in the area like consulting or professional services at Dell, we go build a practice, and when it's matured to the point where you could consider it a best practice, we share that with our customers. And so our service engagements are helpful and lighter weight and less costly, and the objective is to try and get the customer, you know, kind of on their own if that's where they want to go, right? We teach you and then you go manage it. And if you don't want to do that, we have managed services. We can manage it for you if that's the way you want to handle it. But the OpenView set of practices, the Tivoli set of practices are really kind of designed around don't touch it. You know, if it's not working right, call us back and we'll fix it for you. It's complicated, and you know, you really don't want to try this at home. Professional driver, closed course, you know, so it's a totally different philosophy. It's complexity, and they like it because it engages their services organization and their custom software organizations and their integration organizations. If you want to patch your OS and your applications, then that's the patching plugin that you would buy. Okay?
And that would not be included in the Dell?
No, because those are things that, you know, what would be included in the Dell is what you get in ITA today. I can discover and inventory and monitor the hardware, and I can update the hardware, okay? But even beyond one-to-one deployment or scripted deployment, to have a GUI-based one-to-many deployment, that's an upsell, right? That's a, you know, that's provisioning, that's premium stuff, right? Yeah, I've got a package here and I'm going to drag and drop it onto 1,400 servers. That's a premium offering. Patching the OS, the applications, deeper asset management. There's actually a CMDB upgrade. You know, the database is there and it populates all the columns, but if you want to draw associations between entities in the CMDB and do stuff like that, that's a package that you add over the top. And they're all, and you know, there's all the piece parts that you can get, but they also have something called a total management suite. You can buy everything they built, whether you use it or not, for you know, sort of price per managed node. It's a little different price for a client than it is for a server.